Hello, this is Angela with Ethic of Permaculture. Obviously, I'm not in my permaculture garden today. I am at Normandale Park in Northeast Portland. This is a park with a playground and also with a dog park behind me. So I'm here with my 4 kids, my husband, and my 2 standard poodles. We're enjoying the last of the summer weather before we settle into kind of our fall routine. My husband is a special education teacher, and this is his last week of summer. So, as long as I'm sitting here and my kids are running around and the dogs are getting walked, I thought I would make a quick video because I've been promising y'all that I would begin to discuss the third ethic of permaculture. Now, permaculture is a design system and it has 3 ethics and 12 principles. The 3 ethics are earth care, people care, and fair share, also called share the surplus. And the first 2 ethics I've talked about extensively on this channel, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Permaculture strives to care for the earth and care for people. So we live in a way that not only is not ecologically damaging, is not only kind to the environment, but actually seeks to regenerate and heal places in the wild and heal landscapes that have been damaged by human activity. The second ethic says that we don't live our lives in a way that exploits other people, either people that live now, as in laborers or our neighbors, but also people in the future. So we don't damage the environment and we don't damage spaces so that future generations have to pay the consequences of our behavior. The third ethic gets a little bit tricky and can be really contentious. It depends on who you talk to about it in permaculture. So it originally was called fair share, where it's about equal distribution of resources, and it ties into the other 2 ethics. And that third ethic has kind of morphed over the years to become share the surplus. So if you have more than you need, you want to either return it to the earth or you want to return it to communities of people that can utilize it. You don't hoard resources, you don't accumulate resources beyond your needs. But there's so much more to this ethic. And again, folks think that fair share begins to sound like socialism. I've talked about it in the past, like, oh, the dreaded S word. And actually, that's not really the intention. We don't want it to get obscured. We don't want any of these 3 ethics to get obscured by politics, because our ethical choices in permaculture are about designing a regenerative world in which people and the planet are taken care of. So the reason that I want to talk about the third ethic here today in this setting is because one of the really practical ways we can come to understand share the surplus and understand fair share is talking about community spaces. Community spaces build resilience, they obviously build community, they make us a stronger people and also make us a more ecologically responsible people. So when I think about fair share and share the surplus as 2 ways to kind of help us understand the third ethic, I think about those 2 kind of wrapped up together. So I think, how can we create shared surplus? How can we utilize our extra resources, our extra spaces in a way that benefits everybody in the community? How can we pool our resources? And obviously, while I am here at the park, I'm thinking of those community spaces that are a living example, a practical working example of share the surplus. So when we have fair share, it makes us more abundant and resilient people. It helps us access resources that we couldn't access as individuals, and it also spreads out the burden of caring for those resources. And so that makes us inherently stronger and creates opportunities and access points for people who couldn't otherwise experience those. So when we're sitting in a city park here, one where there's a dog park and there's a playground, those are really easy to understand places that are shared public spaces where our tax dollars, our extra resources go to create and care for these spaces and maintain them, and they are accessible to everybody in the community. We can't all have large swaths of land for each of our individual dogs to run in, but we can create a shared space that uses fewer resources. Obviously, one large dog park uses far less land than if we had individual running spaces for every individual dog. So by using community resources, we use less land overall, and also the maintenance is concentrated in one area. So there's less pollution, less waste, and less upkeep over time. Other community spaces besides playgrounds and parks and picnic areas, which are all really common in urban and suburban areas, there are places such as downtown Portland has fountains. A lot of folks here don't have air conditioning, and in hot weather, public fountains are great places to play and cool off. Great places where we can gather as a community. Obviously in pre-COVID days, hopefully soon in post-COVID days, we will be able to enjoy those spaces a little bit more again. But those serve a double purpose. In permaculture, we call that stacking functions, where folks can come and cool off in the heat and have a shared public space where they can have recreation and enjoyment. Other examples of sharing the surplus are when we create shared community spaces that actually have not only an entertainment or recreational bent, but also really practical, concrete ways they benefit people's lives. And the two big examples I think of that are kind of cornerstones for me when I think about building resilient permaculture-based communities are public libraries and community gardens. So not everybody has the resources to accumulate their own vast private library, and oftentimes we don't need those resources for more than a brief period of time. So when we talk about share the surplus, a library is a great example of how we are not hoarding resources, we are making books accessible to people when they need them. Folks can use them for their own personal enrichment, enjoyment, education, and then they can get shared with the next person. It's a great way to think about that third ethic of permaculture, so it doesn't feel like scary socialism. It feels like, well, these are normal institutions that function and everybody accesses and that enrich the lives of everybody in our community, that make our communities more functional spaces. So for me, library, definitely number one. Number two, community gardens, particularly in urban spaces, for people who are renters, for people in apartments, for houseless people. People who don't have access to land they cannot either afford or their life circumstances prevent them from purchasing swaths of land in order to garden. Community gardens are a great resource. I know for us, when we were renters, it was really useful to have a space that we can utilize for a short period of time, 1 or 2 or 3 seasons, and then pass it along to the next person who needs a community garden space. So that land is going to be maintained as an agricultural space and passed down from person to person, whoever registers for a community garden plot that year. So for me, if I think about how do I explain share the surplus to other people, how do I explain fair share to other people, talking about those community spaces like libraries and community gardens really get people thinking about how we already have those in our society. We already have them and we can really see the benefits of them. Other examples are places like public beaches, hiking spaces, national and state parks. Those are all examples of preserving resources, saving public land for community use, and how our tax dollars that we all contribute just a small amount to go into maintaining and protecting those spaces. So the benefits of having share the surplus community spaces are that they create social hubs where we can create and reinforce our social bonds with each other, build a sense of community. They reduce costs for the individual overall, and they also share the burden of maintenance across a large group of people so that the upkeep for each individual is really a minuscule amount, but yet we still have access to these large spaces, large catalogs of books. Even though we couldn't afford to maintain these as individuals, and we probably couldn't afford to purchase them as individuals in the first place, we share the burden across everyone in the community, and that way everybody also shares the benefit. So for me, when we're thinking about the third ethic of permaculture and how it can feel really scary and really political to some people, talking about those community spaces that we all utilize in the course of our lives, be it playgrounds, be it dog parks, be it public beaches, that's a really good way to introduce people to the concept of having spaces and having resources that are pooled for public use, and how it can be a really good entree into discussing what does it mean to share the surplus? What does it mean to not have more than we need? What does it mean to not hoard resources, but instead turn those resources over either to communities as a whole or to share them with other individuals? So that's just the beginning cusp of what it means to start looking at that third ethic of permaculture, keeping in mind that when we do the third ethic of permaculture well, we are living the first and the second ones. When we have community spaces, we are having good utilization of land, we are having conservation of resources, so we are engaging in the first ethic of earth care. Obviously, when we have shared public spaces where we have resources accessible to all people who couldn't access them otherwise, we are utilizing good people care as well. We are enriching the lives of the people in our community. So keep that in mind. When you think about what the third ethic of permaculture means to you, think about what it means to your community as a whole, and how if we're doing it right, we are fulfilling the first and second ethics as well. So I am going to go run my dogs around since they have a lot of energy. You can see Apollo here being a naughty boy. He's really ready to go run around. And Athena down on the ground next to me. So we're going to go run them around. I hope you all are enjoying the last little bit of your summer. I'll be back from my garden next time. Thanks.